Welcome to Dungeon Master Talk, the podcast by Dungeon Masters for Dungeon Masters. I am Kyle, and with me today, as always, is...
I'm Shay. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, sir?
Doing pretty good, man. It's been a while since we've chatted some D&D, bro.
Oh, it has been a hot minute, that's for sure. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us once again this week and downloading this podcast and giving it a listen. You have no idea how much it means to Shay and I that you would take time out of your precious day, your precious time, to listen to us talk about something we love near and dearly to our hearts, which is being a dungeon master. If you are enjoying this podcast, if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a review on your platform of choice, a 5-star if you would, that really does help us out with the algorithms. We do not pay to advertise this show, so the algorithms and the sharing on the social medias is literally the only way that our stuff gets out there. So if you're enjoying this and want to have others enjoy this too, we appreciate your help. And for those of you that have reached out to us on our email, dungeonmastertalk@gmail.com, thank you so much. For everyone else who hasn't, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us at dungeonmastertalk@gmail.com, like I just said, or on the Facebooks or the Twitters. We are at DMT the podcast. That word is hard for me to say all of a sudden.
Words are hard.
On Twitter. Yes, they are. And we have the Dungeon Master Talk page on Facebook. We look forward to hearing from you.
To echo what you've been saying, Kyle, thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come listen with us. We honestly didn't know what to expect when we launched this podcast, and it's just been so overwhelming to see the downloads that you guys have graced us with. We just super appreciate you guys joining us every other week when we drop a new episode to talk Dungeon Masters from the DM's perspective. Dungeon Masters from the DM's perspective? How about Dungeons and Dragons from the DM's perspective? Yeah, words are hard today, bro.
They are. And listeners, you're about to listen to approximately 30 to 45 minutes on average of us stumbling through our words. The premium content you've come to expect from the two of us, for sure. Shay, what topic do we have today?
So, as you guys have probably figured out from the title, we are going to be talking about that transition period between long stretches of sessions, right? So what do I mean by that? We're talking about from the time that one session ended to the time another session starts. Sometimes if you guys have a good schedule and you can meet weekly, monthly, and you guys are very consistent with that, that's the best way to go. But obviously sometimes life happens, things come up, and that goes for the DM, it goes for your players. And so sometimes you can't get the group together for months. You know, it happens. And so how do you come out of that? How do you prepare for the next session? Kyle, don't let me forget, we did play our game last weekend. So make sure I don't forget to give an update on that.
I will hold you to it. A spoiler alert, listeners. Neither of my groups I DM4 actually ended up playing since the last time I gave an update. So... I will not have one. Sorry about that.
We will have another session at some point.
Yes, we will. But it makes this topic really relevant. You listeners have probably heard my group that Shay has been a player in for quite some time. Mm-hmm. We meet monthly, so that's already a significant period of time. And my players have gotten used to hearing me say, I'm helping you remember how to read your sheet. Like, that's the point of what I'm doing here. And so... that's something that I've gotten used to as a DM, is that beginning of the session period, kind of re-coaching, air quotes. You can't hit audio medium, air quotes.
He's trying, guys. He's really trying. I see the quotes.
Eventually, you will be able to just feel my physical emotes through this podcast. They're strong. Anyway, like, how do you really just, like, as a DM, prepare to come back from that break? Because it is doable. I don't want any groups to die off just because, like, you missed a couple in a row. My group that Shay plays in, we actually once recovered from about a 4-month lapse in playing. And it was to the point that people were like, what were we doing? And we did get together and have everybody kind of read off their notes. And we rewound a little bit because we were in kind of a high intense moment, and actually retconned a tiny bit and went back and re-entered the dungeon so it could be fun again. But we did stuff like that and got up and going, and that's kept this group strong. And it's something that I do want to just help every DM out there with, because odds are you will encounter that break of time between your sessions that's just abnormally long for you. It might not be months like it was for us, because again, going weeks is not abnormal. But if you're a weekly group and you miss 3 weeks in a row, you can recover. And so that's the point of this episode, is how to help you do so. So before we jump into this, it's also been said on this podcast before, Shay and I do both record our sessions. I actually only record one of my two. That's because the other one, it just logistics hasn't worked out to record it, so we probably won't. So note taking heavily there. So obviously we recommend that. We've recommended that before. So I'm going to eliminate that one as kind of labeling it as the cop-out answer right now, because obviously we have recording equipment, how you hear our voices now. We don't expect everybody to have that. And so we're going to also arm you with some other ideas and resources. Shay, was there anything you wanted to add before we hop in and start our great debacle?
I mean, just to kind of piggyback off of your recording thing, like Kyle said, we do have recording equipment. I kind of went off the deep end here right before we started this podcast because, as I mentioned before, I am a music major. And so I actually ended up getting a full like mixer, and I ended up getting a bunch of like XLR mics and condenser mics and stuff like that. So when I do my recordings, I actually do have people mic'd up, literally kind of similar to live stream, similar to like live play, only like the mics are like on the table. They're not like lapels that are attached to you. But that has helped me a lot in the respect of, I remember the timbre of the voices. I remember exactly what happened because I can hear it again. Right.
Yep.
And for me, I actually do edit it just a little bit, and I'll send it out to the players so that they actually have a copy of that recording so that they also can listen to the notes and remember what happened pre-session going into it. But even if you don't have a whole mixer and a bunch of fancy equipment, even just setting a phone out on the middle of your table that can do a voice recording or can record to like a hard drive or something, that can do wonders. It does. I mean, you don't have to get a bunch of equipment. You can just do a basic recording, and set it up the best way you can to capture the best mic placement. But other than that, I mean, I would recommend highly, if you can, do something like that to help you remember each session as you go forward.
Yeah, because that's actually, unlike Shay, I do not have all that fancy equipment. So as you guys probably caught in the first, 10 episodes of this podcast, Shay sounded cleaner than I did. Hopefully we've resolved that. I have now one nice mic and a okay setup for single person recording.
Yeah.
But for my D&D games, I do not have everyone mic'd up. I have this one nice mic put out onto the center of the table, set to broad spectrum recording. Prior to that, I had a very cheap USB mic that I purchased years ago for, I wanted to be a YouTube gamer. Please don't search for me. They were not good.
Where can we find you, Kyle?
No. No, not doing that. If you have found it.
Is that what I'm hearing? We don't talk about Bruno?
Yeah, it wasn't like traumatic or anything. It just, my quality was very hit and miss. There's very few I'm actually proud of there, so that's why I'm not advertising for it. I had a very cheap USB mic from that, and literally what I did is aim that up into the air at the center of the table. It's definitely not something I'd want quality-wise to send out to the world to listen to, because it's not made for that. But it's clean enough that I can hear everybody can hear themselves. You also picked up on every sound in the room, so then like funny moments like when the dog messed somebody up was caught on there, which I appreciated. But it's not great for like audio quality. There's also some times where we had some screamers and some loud singing, and it'd blow your ears out. And so, like I said,
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. You don't want to hear that.
No, because it's Shay going top of his lungs.
It's true. I'm trying to sing Freebird as loud as I can, and it doesn't always come out that great.
Yep. And when I give the audio out to my listeners, not my listeners, wow, my players, I do some bare minimum just audio bouncing through Audacity. That's all I do. So I don't edit. I don't cut anything. And that's all I do to just have it purely for the note-taking purposes. So just kind of backpacking off of what Shay said there, is it like you don't have to have something grand. I know that there's a lot of people out there who, you're an audiophile. You really love that clean, crisp audio, in which case I'm sorry again for my audio in the first 10 episodes. But like,
hey, if it makes you feel any better, y'all, my first the first few episodes for me, I was literally on my phone with a pair of Apple headphones and voice recording into that. So Like, I totally get it.
It's just something, listeners, that like talk about it obviously with your party. Be like, hey, recording this, not planning ever releasing it. That's what I did. Is I came to my party and I was like, hey, I want to record this purely for notes to help us out for those pauses going forward. Help me to not have to write so many notes during the session. And there's been goods, like I do want to pro-con this a little bit. Like my note taking prior to recording was very strong and I had a good solid note system. After I started recording, I got pretty lax with my notes. And that didn't make preparing for a session hard. It made writing for the story, though, outside of session harder. So I've had to bring my note-taking back up always. It's not as, like, detail-oriented note-taking as it was prior to the recording, but it's strong again. So, listeners, if you do go the recording route, trust me, you still do want to take those strong notes, because going back and listening through a 4-hour long recording multiple times to try to catch beats after the fact is hard, but it is nice to be able to give that a listen over to. Sorry, that was a really weird way to talk, human. It is really nice to listen to your previous recording the week that you're gonna play again.
No, to be fair, like I'll be honest, like the week of the session, I usually listen to it like 4 or 5 times, like while I'm at work, just so like. But for whatever reason, I usually remember stuff better if I hear it. Writing stuff down when I'm note-taking is kind of the worst for me. So, like, listening to it over and over again, it usually pounds it into my head pretty good. But to kind of go back to what you were kind of talking about, note-taking, sometimes what I'll do as I'm listening through it, though, like if I'm on a break at work, I have a tab in OneNote for each of my players, right? So one tab has their backstory, one tab has, like, different ideas of like weapons I want to give them or like different like plot hooks. And so like if I get a random idea that goes to one of those players, I'll like write it down in there. And that way I can kind of piggyback off of that and then continue to develop that character further or figure out a way to incorporate them better into the game.
No, I was just saying, so I think we're going to do the same thing. So we kind of got off talking a lot about the recording and our note-taking habits with it. In a way, we kind of touched about one of the other ways that you compare for those long breaks, which is the kind of other obvious one if you're not going to record, is the note-taking. If you have good notes, it's easier to intro back into that. I think that's great for you, the DM, to prepare back in for the next session. And that's also why, even though I do record my sessions, I do strongly promote to my players to have their form of note-taking down. I do have a player who takes his notes in character, which has arrived at the strangest and most amazing notes ever, and that's our druid. Our rogue halfling. Yeah, our rogue halfling takes his notes in character, and
his notes are freaking hilarious. They're seriously hilarious
because his character has like a broken speech, and so he takes his notes in that very simple broken speech. He refers to Shay's character as Shiny Freckles. And so, like, his notes will literally sometimes reference, and the freckles went this way. And, like, that's what it says, is this way. We don't know what way it is, but to his character, that would have made perfect sense. That's, like, note-taking obviously is a very strong way to handle those breaks because they are obviously common form way of just remembering things over time. That's not what this is really, what we're going into. That's why we're kind of brushing over this. Like, we wanted to address, hey, we record, that's how we handle it. We have our listeners, wow, I did it again. We have our players able to listen to those recordings and help them catch up as well. And then that's how we do it. There's other tools.
Can I stop you for just a second?
Yeah.
Can I stop you for just a second? One of the things that I like to do, especially if I have a long period, because we do once a month just like you do. And one of the things, like when we start session, I ask them, what do they remember from last session?
Yep.
I already know, obviously, what happened because I've been listening, and I'm assuming that my players listen to it before. Maybe they don't, maybe they do. But I've kind of put the ball back in their court a little bit to say, okay, I know it's been some time, but meet me halfway here and say, okay, I'm preparing the session, I'm preparing what's happening next, but I also remember what happened last time, and I want to see how much you remember and how much you can recant back to me so that way we know we're on the same page.
Yep. I established early on in my campaign the recap at the beginning of the next session. For session 1, I actually recapped session 0. And I was like, we gathered, we made our characters. We played Shay's one-off. He tried to kill me by giving me an alcoholic beverage.
I did not kill you. I did not try to kill you.
My life points hit 0 for having a drink at a bar.
You passed out. You just passed out.
You told me my life points hit... No, I'm teasing.
No, I said you fade to black. That's all I said.
All right. So, see? But I established that, like, very early on, there's going to be a recap. And at first, I always gave the recap. Even one time, I made the recap a song. I still have that saved on my phone. It was set to... Don
McLean's American Pie.
Yep. I was going to... It was actually really set to the Weird Al parody of it. But since it was also a parody, it's hard to say that you parodied the parody because you're parodying.
You parodied the parody?
So that's what it was set to. It was really fun to make. But then I also started kind of randomly calling on my players. So, hey, Shay, can you recap for us what happened last time? Now, the thing I make sure I do is I am prepared to give the recap. If they are unable to, if they feel put on the spot. I also didn't do that until I knew my players really well. Knew that I was going to be comfortable calling them. And I don't call the players that were absent. Obviously, that would be a real jerk move because that's literally going like, did you memorize the recording?
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, you didn't play it, so you're not calling back on your own memories. So a recap is a very strong tool. And also, it's even if you give a recap, it's neat to still call out your players like, what do you remember from it? Because what you remember as a DM, you're normally going to remember your plan for the session and then how they deviated from your plan for the session. Because that's, to you, what the game was. They experience it very differently as a player, so getting their recap, sometimes there's stuff like I've taken big notes, I've listened to the recording a few times, and then they'll still call out something like, oh wow, that didn't jump out to me any of the times. And so now it's in my notes because I now know that mattered to your player.
Exactly. I guess, okay, so we've kind of talked about like the how to remember the last session. So let's kind of like fast track that into, okay, how do we now prepare for the next session? And let's go with the caveat that we did not take note.
Did not record.
Yeah, we didn't record. Yep.
So I think like for the next session, y'all, it's really important to really nail a couple things down, especially if it's been a significant break. I highly recommend your first session back from a break, if possible, unless you're in a story point that would make no sense to it, have combat. Because it is amazing, especially if your players are new, how easy it is to forget the intricacies of your character, what they're good at, stuff like that. Also, it's not a bad idea to just have something that'll reset the health at the start of it. Because after a long break, apps clear data. If they're using apps, notes get lost. An implied long rest.
People don't write their hit points down. People don't remember what they put in their inventory.
Especially if they thought it was going to be 1 week. Because the assumption is, I can remember a week. I can remember I was at 43 health next week. Boom, it's been a month and a half. I don't remember what I had for lunch this past Tuesday. Like, they're not going to remember their life total now. So those are just, like, advice points that I have for you that I've come from my experience as DM to do these things, because even my players that have played some, and even now that we've been playing for a good amount of time, it's crazy how that first one back after a break, I say roll initiatives and they go, what's my modifier for that again? And like, what's the big one on your character sheet?
You see that shield looking thing? Look at that.
And say, and if you don't know, it's based on your dexterity.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to just have that kind of reminder of the basic rules. If you can't do combat, make sure you do something like that has them rolling some dice, looking at their sheet again, because that's really what I have found, at least with my players. I'm not going to say that my players are the perfect test body for all players everywhere, but for my players...
Aw, man!
Well, we are getting big, but I mean, sample size wise, I just don't think we're there for a good... strictly speaking for this
work in progress.
But for my players, they don't typically have too hard of a time remembering how to role play, and they'll get into the role of their character, especially when they get back in with the group, the dynamics start to fall in line, they start having fun again, boom, they're role playing again. It is, though, for my group especially, hard to get them back into the actual game part of D&D, remembering how to play it, remembering how to read their sheet, all that stuff. So that's the part that when I say I'm coaching or reteaching my players, I'm not saying that to be talking down to them. My players are awesome. I am spoiled as a DM. I have a great play group. but it is helping them remember how to do that. So I make sure that I plan out either combat or some scenario coming up where I'm going to have them rolling dice, like a challenge or a puzzle or something like that.
I was just going to mention skill challenges is a good way, like that's non-combat necessarily, but it's a good way to kind of like get them looking at their sheet again. It's getting them to get into that mode of, okay, I know my character's good at this or not so good at that, but hey, what the heck, I'm going to roll this thing that I'm not really good at and see what happens, you know, and just kind of roll, you know, kind of get back into the character that way.
Yeah, 100%. And it, like, those are just little things that's easy to build into a session. Now, also, a good thing that I've done a few times when it's been a long break is it's really tried to get them used to driving the narrative again themselves, because while they fall into that roleplay, they also will have a tendency to fall back into that early stages of D&D where it's like, okay, DM, now what? When really...
Yep, lead me.
When it really should be DM saying, okay, players, now what? Like, I think the question that's kind of I'm losing my words for it, but the cliche, there we go. The cliche D&D question, and what do you want to, like, what do you do? I think it's actually important to ask that after a long break. It's a simple way without having to come out and say, like, hey, players, play the game.
Yeah.
Getting them back into the flow of things. So reset the scene, because that's a major thing to do when it's been a long break. Reset the scene, repaint your picture, re-describe anything that, like, even if you're like, I know last time I gave the perfect picture of where you're at. Like, I've never been better at describing something in my life. You need to repaint the picture. It's been long enough. Assume that they've lost their notes when you're repainting the scene. If you're also, if your players like mine, they'll let you know if they don't need it. Normally, for my players, in the form of giving me a ton of crap.
That's also true. One of the things too, like to go along with what you're saying, like, let's just say, for example, they stayed the night at a tavern, right? And they all got a long rest. Everybody regained all their hit points, spell slots, and all that jazz, right? So you could set the scene and then have, like, the barkeep look them over and say, hey, what do you guys look like you slept pretty well. What would you like for breakfast? You know, kind of like, or, hey, what do you guys have going on today? You know, what can I get for you? It's, stuff like, you act the part. You're jumping in first into the role play to get them you're leading them into that role play, but you're also setting the scene to where they can't give you a yes or no question. Yep. It's not a simple yes or no answer. They have to say, oh, we're going to go visit this smithy. We're going to go dig a hole to China, whatever that ends up being. But they have to tell you what's going on in that moment. Or like, let's just say, for example, if you guys end up in a dungeon somewhere and you take your long rest, you wake up, maybe set the scene, maybe have them all roll perception checks. Maybe they hear a little noise. Maybe they hear a little footsteps, fill in the blank, and just kind of lead them into that role play a little bit.
You can also, if like they ended at the end of the previous combat the previous time, and then your storyline for them being full health again is they took a rest. You can have it be like, that guy you knocked out, he's up again. Little mini combat, like expect, like make it easy. So what I normally do with that welcome back combat, welcome back challenge, it's intentionally easier than a combat that they'd normally encounter. Because, man, I would, just full transparency, I would feel like the worst DM alive if their welcome back battle was the you died battle. Because you were out of practice of playing your character.
Welcome to hell. This is level 1.
Welcome back to D&D. Reroll your character.
Welcome back to Session 0, Part 3.
If you're not doing combat, it's really nice to kind of hit some of those, like your best of hits. If you're dungeon crawling, a puzzle, a nice new item, find if you can. If you didn't, just reward them a big item. There's a lot of ifs on this. If you guys, I hope...
Give them a montage.
The montages are great, honestly. If you can give them that kind of flash fly through a scenario to like hit back through, like, yep, this is how you do combat, this is how you track inventory, this is how you check your sheet, now we're ready to go storyline. Players, if it sounds like we're giving a lot of ifs on this, please don't think that we're trying to cop out of the answer or we're spinning our wheels here. D&D is literally the game of infinite possibilities. Like, you and your game could have a highly motorized mega car that is literally powered by gasoline. They have to go fueled up at a gas station. If that's your D&D, you're able to do that. That can't exist in my world. We're like light bulbs when my playgroup, my playgroup has seen a light bulb. I didn't call the light bulb because it's not called light bulbs in that world. I tried my best to describe vaguely what a light bulb would be described as by somebody in like medieval times.
Right.
And I don't even know if I don't know if I did a good enough job for them to pick up that I was describing a light bulb. Like, this is the game of infinite possibilities. So we're trying to describe to you guys enough scenarios, enough vagueness that it can apply to yours, if that makes sense.
For sure. Really, at the end of the day, I think it's one of those things where it naturally come together quicker. Yep. And especially if this is a group that has been playing for a while, let's say you've been playing for like 6 months and then you take like a month and a half off for life or whatever. That's going to be a lot easier to jump into versus like you had session 1 and then it's been 2 months, or it's been session 0 and 2 months.
And that's what's happening to my other play group, my second group. Don't want to label them as other. My second group that I've talked about on this podcast that I am DM of, we met for session 1, had a really good session. They jumped right into role-playing the characters. They're about midway through a quest. We just ran out of time. And so we ended session 1, kind of come back for session 2. Life happened for the same reason that I couldn't record a couple episodes ago. Yeah. I missed the session. A couple players have missed some sessions. So we haven't been able to meet for a little bit. So now we're still trying to meet up for session 2. We've had 0 and 1. And now we need to have our second session. It's going to have been a couple months. So for me to prepare for that, what I've been doing, I'm preparing a very nice recap, trying to go over everything from the conversations that they had, bring it back up. I've also changed up what they were about to have happen in my plans to kind of allow them to get reintroduced. Luckily, this was an early encounter, so it also is very much set up to allow for them to have some time in the combat. They shouldn't be able to be one-shotted and stuff like that. And then I've changed up, like, the big story beats that I have in my mind for this, like, initial quest for them are unchanged. The kind of how it's going to arrive and the stuff that they're going to do is changed up a little bit that I have planned to encourage them to get back into the character sheets, encourage them to refine their characters again. Because when you're coming back from session 1, in session 1, you're still learning who you are as a character. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if you think back, anybody who's played a D&D character for a really long time, they experience natural growth because you've discovered them, you've grown with them, they become well-rounded, that was really hard for me to say, but eventually it becomes really easy to play that character. When you first started out, though, they were like, am fighter, swing good, strong, decent intelligence.
Do I scratch my back with this long sword, or do I hit somebody with it? Like, I
have armor. Like, that means I'm tank, right? I'll stand in front. Like, there is thought because you build out your backstory. Yeah. But it's amazing when you get into interactive moments of that character, how much of it is discovery. Even when you have somebody like Shay who loves to roll characters and writes backstories for fun, he still discovers his character. Mm-hmm. Dakar, his druid, is an amazing character now. Had a good foundation, but is an amazing character now. He has changed. He changed a lot in those first few sessions as Shay was finding out, like, how do I really want to play him?
Yeah. Yep.
And so, for what I'm really building into this next session is some, like, I had to challenge myself a little bit because they were like eve of a battle, really, and so that battle was supposed to be like a grand to do. It's now going to be like a tiered deal. Hopefully, you guys aren't listening. If you are, hopefully I'm being vague enough. Also trying to include earmuffs for this one. Also trying to include a lot more not human, but like NPC interaction following that. Some opportunities for them to talk their way out of some stuff, talk them their way into some other stuff, while still hitting the big story beats I wanted to give them for the type of game they described to me. So hopefully, here in a couple weeks, we'll be able to meet and play for that one. But it won't be this month, sadly, so it is going to go on a little bit longer before that group gets to play again, as much as it hurts my heart.
I know, but it'll be worth it once we get a chance to get back into it. So, yeah, I guess just to really wrap it up, and I think we've kind of talked about this when we were talking about our improv, the best way that you can get ready for your next session is to plan it, but also to really help yourself help you in a sense, because when you prepare yourself well at the end of the last session, like you write down all of the villain's hit points, you write down, the highlights that everybody did, and you can kind of set yourself up to really kind of pick up where you left off, even if it has been quite some time. I have found a lot of utility in the recording aspect of things. I really enjoy being able to just sit at work and be like, hey, this is kind of cool. I get to listen to my session over and over and over, especially if we have like this really cool like character to character interaction, or if there's like a really cool like fight scene that we had, or something. It's like you kind of get to relive that, and it's not necessarily like as an ego boost necessarily, but it's just I don't know, it's just kind of fun. It's kind of refreshing. So,
and when you get to when you re-listen to it and you hear your wizard crack a really good wise joke that you did not
catch the first time,
catch live, it's like I die every time that happens. When I listen back to the recording, and it's like I legitimately didn't hear him say that. Or sometimes he'll ask a question and I was looking up something and I answer nonsensically the first time. I didn't catch that I was doing that, so now I'm trying to listen to it better. And so it does like add to those moments. Before we wrap up here, there's this one last thing I do want to cover with this. If you did not set yourself up well, so like you didn't first listen to this, you had a session, now there's a long pause, now you're hearing this and you're preparing for your next session, don't panic.
Yeah.
First and foremost, this is a game. What I did when I didn't set up myself well for a multi-month break the first time, I reached out to my players and I actually asked them ahead of time, hey guys, what do you have in your notes for last time? Where do you last remember leaving off? And also, don't be afraid, because you're playing this for your fun. The head cannons are the literal only cannons that matter for you guys. And for those of you who don't know what a head cannon is, it is your version of what's true for the world you created.
Exactly.
Hopefully, I'm just explaining that to the choir. But do not be afraid to retcon things. Do not be afraid to reset the dungeon, to take another go at it and have fun. Do what is best for your group, and the number one way to know that if you're uncertain is ask.
Yes.
Hey, party, would you guys mind if we reset this dungeon? It's been a few months. I think it'd be more fun if we just redid it.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're just getting into the dungeon and you haven't really made it that far. Like if you're like the door away from the boss level, like maybe just backtrack it like halfway through the dungeon and kind of maybe start from there for a last save point.
Don't make them redo the hardest puzzle you ever made just for the sake of that you want them to do it again.
Like, oh yeah, but you can't do that again.
Yeah, I changed it. The answer's not 3 this time,
It's
Dave.
2.5.
And 3/4.
3/4 gets me every time.
Well, how can it be 2.5 and 3/4?
Which means it's 5/8. Gong.
You were pretty quick there. I'm quite proud.
Hey, I've worked with the tape measure a time or two. All right, this is what I promised you. I promised you guys an update, and I am going to not get scolded by my players for not remembering to give this update. So
this just ends Shay's players. This is the time code you have been waiting for. It is coming. Just wait for it. Hold on. He's prepping. He's reading his notes. He's getting.
Wait, there's smoke coming out of my ears. Oh no! Smoke! Get back! Get back!
Oh no! His mic broke. Okay. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. Just kidding. Here is Shay's update.
Oh man, that was good. So we had our session, and we actually added another player. So I don't know if I've mentioned this in another. I might have mentioned this. I don't remember. But here, as of about a month or so ago. About a month and a half ago, I jumped into a Warhammer game that was outside of this, and the DM for that group and I got to talking, and he's like, "I have this idea for a character," and I said, "Sweet, come on over on Friday, on Saturday night, we'll play." So I now have 6 players, I think, which is about the same size as Kyle's group.
Yep,
and it's been really fun. So my group has this special dynamic because normally I say that it's good to have a niche. Like you have your thing that you're really good at. So like your rogue is really sneaky, your cleric's really healy, stuff like that. Well, the way the characters are set up, it's really good because they have at least 2 guys that are good at everything, or 2 guys that are good at one thing.
That's nice.
So like I have 2 really sneaky people that will sneak off and scout stuff out. Or I now have 2 healers, which is what the new guy came in as. And then we have fighters and the magic guys and all that stuff. But this guy, there is a side of him that the players have yet to see.
Ooh.
And I'm excited for when that happens. I won't give away the details. I'm trying not to give away too much.
No spoilers.
But we actually have 2 life clerics. That's what so we had an elven cleric and now we have a human cleric. One is a cleric of Shantia, the goddess of agriculture, And the new guy is a cleric of Levanthar, who is also called the Morning Lord. He's a god of life, life essence, stuff like that. So
that seems like a good one to be a cleric of if you're wanting to be a healing
you
cleric.
know, I figured it was a good idea. So I don't want to give away too many details as we just got him into the fold. He was actually brought in as a prisoner where the team was huddled up in a dungeon, and the sorcerer, actually, of all people, not the rogue, the sorcerer, went and busted him out of prison, and then they got into this big fight. Well, the leader of this group was the target, the mark, if you want to call it. He was the mark for the other cleric that had already been in the group. She had been trying to find him forever. And so
nice
that there was some redemption, maybe not redemption, but validation after taking care of business with him. So
that is always nice to introduce a character like in that manner, to have ties in a little bit when they're joining in, and also kind of do it in the form of like having like lead into an important, like not important, but a carrying on plot point.
Oh, for sure. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us again this week. Like we said, we totally appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for listening to us talk about long pauses and hopefully not having too much dead air time on this one. If you would, like Kyle said, just leave us a review on your favorite platform of choice. Subscribe to this podcast. That will help us boost the algorithms for this show and just help get the word out about Dungeon Master Talk. If you would like to tell us about any long wait times that you've had with your team and you want to tell us how that went for you guys, or maybe some tips and tricks on how you were able to not have to have some of those longer times, you can always email us at dungeonmastertalk@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on the Dungeon Master Talk Facebook page, Kyle said, and you can also hit us up with the hashtag Dungeon Master Talk on Twitter, or tag us at DMT the podcast, and we would just love to talk with you about all things DM related. So, that being said, for all of us here at Dungeon Master Talk, I am Shay.
And I'm Kyle.
And we will see you next time on Dungeon Master Talk.
Bye, guys.